welcome to our Women in Real Estate Luncheon here at USC. This event is special this year because we're combining the Lusk Women in Real Estate and the Price Women in Real Estate. So we're combined this go around. So we've got a really nice mix of students and professionals that are here today. So great mix. I see my MREDs, I see my undergrads, BREDs and REFD, and a nice Ross table too, which is wonderful to have you guys as well. So thank you, and obviously our wonderful Lusk real estate board members too. So it's an incredibly special event. I just am so thrilled that we were able to do this. And so thank you so much to the Lusk team and to our team for helping us pull this off. I know if I say names, then I'll forget somebody. So I'm just going to give the broad thank you, Lusk. Thank you to our real estate advisory team for all of your efforts in pulling us together here today. So it's my pleasure to kind of set things up for the day here and introduce our wonderful moderator for the panel. After I ask Lynn to come up and the panelists, I'm sure she'll have them introduce themselves and talk a little bit about themselves. So I won't be introducing the panelists. That said, Lynn King-Tolliver is back again this year. She came last year too. So it made my life easy because I was like, oh, I think I still have my wonderful notes from last time around. But many of you don't know Lynn King-Tolliver, and so I'm going to just share a little bit about her. First of all, she is amazing and wonderful to spend time with, a wonderful mentor, a wonderful colleague, has become a friend of mine, and such an inspiration to me. I've loved seeing her speak at Urban Land Institute events, Lusk Center events. So wonderful leader in the field, huge expertise, and loves being part of the real estate community and expanding its borders and really bringing everybody in. So Lynn, thank you so much. Lynn has a firm, her own firm, and it's called Archere. And I love this name, Archere Investment Management, because when I looked it up originally, I thought, is this really like Archer? And it is. So it is the French, the feminine version of Archer, so Archere. And in it, when you land on the webpage, it says Archer, a person who shoots an arrow, particularly at a target. And so the byline of her company is a focused, targeted approach to real estate investing. Lynn approaches her life that way too. She is very focused, very targeted, and exceptional at hitting the mark. So we are thrilled to have her here and bring over 25 years of experience, over $5 billion worth of capital raised and invested and touched with her business. And so she's got huge experience both as a professional woman and as a person in real estate. So Lynn, thank you so much for joining us again today, and I'll let you introduce your panel, but if everybody wants to come up, that would be great. So.
It is my absolute pleasure to be here today and to look out at this audience. As she mentioned, I had the good fortune to be here last year, and the room was all students, and so it was a bit overwhelming. The response was incredible. We had so much outreach, but it was hard for just the three of us, the only professionals in the room, to respond to all the inquiries. So I'm glad this year that we have the various very experienced and accomplished women who are also members of the Lusk sprinkled throughout the audience, and I will be also including them in our discussion. So as she mentioned, I'll be your moderator today, and I will turn to our panelists and let them introduce themselves and also tell you about their experience or connection to SC.
Thank you, Lynn. Hi, everyone. So my name is Athena. I attended MRED class back in, it was 2013 to 14. So I graduated 2014, worked at an acquisition role in West LA for a little bit, and then went back to JLL on the capital markets for 2 years. And then 8.5 years ago, I made a way to move to Washington, D.C., and I'm currently at Carlyle on the asset management team as a vice president. And I cover asset classes from student housing, multifamily, self-storage, manufactured housing across the country.
Excellent.
Great. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Michelle Bates. I'm a 2017 MRED. Before the MRED, I did appraisal work covering all asset classes in Southern California. And then after MRED, I transitioned to asset management at AEW Capital Management, where I have been ever since I graduated from the MRED. So when I started out as an analyst, I worked on all property types, multifamily, industrial office. And then as I progressed through the company, my focus is now primarily on office properties in the West Coast.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Allison Lynch. I did not go to USC. I went to the school that takes no sides. I went to Mount St. Mary's, and I do not have a degree in real estate. My connection to SC is two. I spent a lot of time here as a college student, but not on campus. Let's just say that. And I live with the Trojans, so I think that makes it safe for me to be in the room. But my background in real estate is a bit accidental, and I came up on the retail side of the business. That's my passion. I currently am at Primestor Development, where we oversee about $1 billion in AUM and have a fairly robust pipeline of development transactions. We're currently working on the master plan of the redevelopment of LA General Hospital, which you may have seen. And we recently broke ground on our first modular multifamily project in the city of Norwalk on a public-private partnership. And that's about a $225 million deal. And then I also serve on the SR Watt family board of a small company that spun out of the Watt companies, where they have about $500 million of AUM under management, both retail and multifamily. And I love real estate, so I'm happy to be here.
Excellent. So as we hear from these ladies, they touch a lot of different sectors. And so we're going to start a discussion with that a little bit today, and kind of some questions around professional focus. What are you focusing on? So in your current role, you mentioned that you handle several sectors and asset management. Was that intentional? How did you end up in those sectors? And go from there.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it was fully intentional. And actually, when I first joined Carlyle, like back in 2017, I was primarily focused on office, retail, and hotel. But my role at the time was like got there, and the fund is like shifting the strategy to focus more on a demographic-focused asset classes and to kind of moving away from GDP focus, which is exactly office, retail, hotel. So I was kind of like getting stuff like ready up to sell, like, runs through like the whole disposition process. And over the time, we actually sold one of like the last Bay Area office deal in March 2020. We closed, and then we started like working from home. And then after that, like I worked on like active adult, like senior living for a little bit, and before kind of like transitioning to student, like self-storage. I would say it's kind of like partially it's due to kind of like the cycles of asset class, like market shifts, but it's also sort of like, we've been asked like, are you interested to, working on different sectors? And I was kind of like, yeah, we're kind of like trying to get exposures to different sectors along the way.
Right. So you made a couple of really interesting points there, that sectors, they go with economic cycles. And so is it correlated or uncorrelated kind of to the economic cycle, as well as investment strategy? Is it GDP focused or is it demographic shift focused? And those can be really, this is not a macroeconomics class, but it just shows how intertwined, especially real estate decisions, and when you're making portfolio decisions, how those are driven. I want you to share a little bit about yours.
Sure. So when I started at AEW, we, all of the asset managers, we were generalists. We worked on everything. And over time, I realized that I really enjoyed working on the office assets the most. So whenever, if someone left or someone promoted and we kind of moved assets around, I would intentionally like put my hand up and be like, I want to work on this asset. And I always kind of had that in the back of my mind, like, you know, if something were to come up, like, what do I want to put my hand up for? What do I want to work on? And so, you know, over time, that kind of meant that I saw, you know, more of our more challenging office assets. There was a period when I was transitioning from being an analyst to being an asset manager, where I put my hand up for anything that I could, be the asset manager for. So that meant, you know, looking over some of our debt portfolio, looking at some of our senior housing portfolio. And then after a while, that it got to be overwhelming to have so many different asset types. And, you know, I felt to really progress, I needed to be more focused so I could, you know, prove myself as an expert in my field. So, gradually over the next couple of years, became mostly focused on office. And then AEW decided internally that everyone is only going to work on one asset class. That actually just happened last year. So that's where I have ended up on the office asset management team.
Excellent. And Allison?
Well, like I said, my career in real estate's accidental. An informational interview is why I'm sitting in front of you. So they're worth every interview you do. And it was a retail shop. It was a brokerage and development shop. And it really drove the first part of my career. I stayed associated with the same principals for a number of years. And it was really as I transitioned into more entrepreneurial shops where maybe we made an investment in some mobile home parks or we had an investment in warehouses that I ended up getting that experience. And I do think that having spent a good period of time just understanding retail, where there are three customers, your investors, the consumer, and your tenants, really helped as I transitioned to other businesses, other sectors. I took that approach to all of them. And this is where I'll give the ULI plug. My experience with hotels was zilch. And we had a ground lease, a partnership interest in a ground lease to a hotel. And I went to a ULI breakfast. And in an hour, I learned more about hotels than anybody else in the firm knew, and came back and was sharing it with people at the firm because I had on my board that it was back pre-pandemic. I wrote when I was coming in where I was. Someone said, "Where were you this morning?" I was at this ULI breakfast. I went to a session on hotels. And I knew heads and beds, and I had all these random facts for those of you who do hotels that were new to me. Like if you ask me about gross sales per square foot and percentage rent, I can talk about that and merchandising. And it turned out the company I was with at the time was also a development company, and one of our development teams was looking at a ground-up hotel. And I showed up and provided value instantly. I provided notes on what we should be talking about and referrals to people that we could engage. And that was just my own curiosity led me to have that experience.
So as you think about that, and you've all explained like some great sector experience, if you're going back to the beginning and think about it now, how important do you think the sector that you're working in is to your career trajectory, your career path?
So I would say even at school, because my background was like hotel before the school, and I wanted to be a journalist. To explore like different asset class. And I was lucky enough to kind of like get a chance to first expose to like office, retail, hotel, and then kind of gradually moving on to like some other sectors. It does give you like, you know, understand the business from a lot of like different angles, but also sort of like seeing how each asset class react during cycles. But I would say moving on, like, you know, as you progress, you kind of have to like focus on certain asset classes because you will need a depth at a certain point. You need like deeper knowledge. You need to understand certain markets. You need to understand the particular operating dynamics of like those asset classes. And also you need like long-term relationships with whoever you're working with. And if you're just kind of like, you know, staying as a generalist, you can't like get to the depths with the things I just mentioned. So, you know, at some point you just have to say, hey, I'm gonna pick like, you know, what I like the most or what I wanna spend my time and efforts on and go from there.
Yeah, and I think it's important to have a broad foundation and an understanding of all asset classes. You know, for example, a lot of my office buildings have retail, so I need to be able to speak to that. Some things kind of touch on, potential redevelopment and just knowing, having a general understanding of all of the other asset classes. I would say that, now being able to focus specifically on office, I'm much more efficient. I'm able to point to, what I've seen at other properties. And I feel like it makes me a better professional overall because I have so much more knowledge of, the specific things that I'm working on day to day. So that's where, over time, I think it is important to find kind of your specialty, your passion. At the same time, definitely for me, I've been trying to kind of keep a pulse on all of the other asset classes because while I love office, we have been disposing of a lot of our office portfolio. None of our clients outside of maybe one or two now are buying office. So you also have to kind of be nimble at the same time, just given where the market is at for any asset class.
I think your question is, how did picking a sector create where I am today? I think it's accidental. I mean, I think there's a correlation. I wouldn't be at a shop that does retail today if I hadn't picked retail early in my career. But I think your point about keeping a pulse on other parts is how I pivoted in my career as I picked up different experience in different product classes. Has allowed me to be in the kind of role I'm in today because I'm not just solely focused, but I'm more senior, so that it evolves over time.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Everyone up here is kind of on the equity side. I've been an equity person my entire life. Kind of that first dollar loss is where we sit and where we operate. But in our audience today, we have several women who are in different sectors as well as in debt. So I'm going to call Anita. Hello. Which sector do you find the majority of your business in? I know you focus on most, and how has that affected your career?
So I'm a little bit of a contrarian to some of the comments, but I guess my name is Anita, and I work at Institutional Property Advisors, which is a group within Marcus & Miller Chapman. I've been there for about 20 years, minus 1 year where I went to Newmark and then came back. So, but here I am. But Lynn and I actually, and this is kind of maybe not directly answering your question, but part of like taking advantage of these events, I think is really critical, and keeping your relationships, not just because obviously Lynn and I stay in touch because we liked each other, but we've been able to work together over the years, and networking is super important in this business. And can I say one other thing before I answer your question? So how I got my job, I studied urban planning and wasn't planning to go into commercial real estate. I was in USC undergrad and grad, and my sorority sister worked as a real estate analyst at Prudential. She would always tell me what she did and sounded interesting. She got fired. So then I asked her if I could apply for her job. And she said, sure, let me tell you the questions they're gonna ask you because you have no idea about any of this stuff. So she prepped me, and where Lynn and I worked at Lincoln Property, I then eventually got her a job there. And that's where before she left the workforce, where she worked. So it's always great women supporting women, and maybe don't be afraid to ask questions that might seem awkward, especially when you have good intent. So now going back to Lynn's question. So I do debt, and I do about half my business is multifamily. And because I'm a broker, so I work on commission, it's hard to turn down business. So the other half of my business is everything else, which I kind of like because it keeps it interesting. I'm not just doing multifamily, even though that is half my business. I'm learning about retail. I'm learning about beds and heads and beds and whatever. So to me, I find it interesting, and I work nationally. And where I can leverage myself is because my company is a national company. If currently we're working on a project in Alabama. And so I reach out to my local colleague who's working with us. So there's a lot of collaboration in life and in business to kind of help you do the best for your client. So I'm a little more of a generalist, and because I find that interesting, learning about different types of properties, doing long-term debt, short-term debt, stabilized property, unstabilized. So I find that interesting. But I'm come from a different perspective than the equity side, being on the debt side and being on the brokerage side. So hopefully that answers your question.
While the mic's over there, why don't you hand it to Alexis, because she also has a sector specialty that hasn't come up yet.
Yes, sorry. Hi, I'm Alexis Lang with Lang Companies. It's an affordable housing and development consulting firm that I started about 4 years ago. And I went to USC for undergrad and did my master's, like an MBA and a master in public policy on the East Coast. But I knew I went to affordable housing in college, actually in high school. I was very weird. But I was like upset about something they were building in Dallas. I was like, I'm gonna come to USC and do like policy work because it was co-ed and it had good sports. And the weather was beautiful. So my entire career has been in affordable housing development. And then I did joint degree for grad school because I knew eventually I'd want to have my own company. I thought I'd be longer in my career, but I decided about 4 years ago to leave. And going back to like the networking thing, like I was like, I'll do development. Like what's the worst that could happen? I can move back home. I can go out of my 401k, all this other stuff. And I posted it on LinkedIn and then people reached out for consulting work. So in general, I work with like really like experienced affordable housing developers who know my experience working on other projects. And I've worked with Primestor before on like jointly with previous companies. But I think it's just like the network's been very helpful. And then, yeah, just being able to focus specifically on housing. Like I know most of the people who like run the big companies in California, and then also because I've worked along with people who are now like the deputy directors for a lot of like the state agencies, so I can call them or text them like when there's a meeting going on. So using that as my background.
Excellent, thank you. So how has sector been an influence in any transitions in your job, or have job transitions kind of been impetus happened in a different way? Can you tell us about either how you, did you have any challenges entering the workforce? Have you made any significant career changes? Talk a little bit about that transition period.
Yeah, definitely. So out of school, I was kind of like, my background was in hotel, and I wasn't sure, like, am I going back to hotel or can I like enter a different sector? I thought like the reason I come here to do MRED was because I'm trying to do something other than hotel. I ended up landing at, it's a company called Oakwood. It's based in West LA. It's like corporate housing. So at the time, the strategy was like to buy traditional apartment and turn it into kind of like service housing. It's kind of like a little bit like hospitality, but it's more like a multifamily, like a blended. So it's kind of like, well, this is kind of like a way stepping out, but it's kind of like, you can't say like, you know, what you did before is completely useless. And then it was like a year of acquisition, but at the end, it was kind of like, because of like the company merge, we had like a very small box to buy deals. And the first couple of deals was bought in like, I would say like Austin. And then after that, like it was like such a box that you keep going smaller and smaller. And then you find like you can't like become more accretive to this portfolio. So at the time was kind of like, I want to have like more broader like capital markets experience. So I went back to JL beyond the capital markets side. That's when like you see different product types and transaction activities. But then it was sort of like an opportunity came up in saying like, hey, there's like asset management role. And actually it's, you know, across the country, like, would you give it a try? And it was sort of like, you know, just want to try something a little bit different and move down to asset management, and knowing like Carlyle actually does all asset class at the time was kind of attractive to me, because that early on, again, like early in my career, I was trying to just expose myself to different sectors. And I was like, okay, I'll come. And because of all the experience I had before, that's why I started with the sectors that I worked on. And then gradually, once like we sold like all those deals, and that's when like they're like, do you want to work on like manufactured housing? Never thought like I would say yes, but you know, it's kind of like a growing sector at the time, and went to like a couple communities to tour, and that's just like how you start like learning new sectors.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you're being able to work on multiple sectors kind of led, or willingness to work on multiple sectors led to your next opportunity. What would you say about that, Michelle?
Yeah, so I think kind of taking a step back for me, even before MRED, I knew I wanted to work in real estate out of undergrad, and I kind of, I talked with a lot of different groups. I talked with property management, I talked with the debt group, and then, I talked with appraisal, and there happened to be a position open there. And, in evaluating it, I was like, when you're 21 years old, you think that the job that you have is going to define the rest of your life. But the way that I like to think about it, looking back, is like, okay, what is going to be like one step forward for me to get to where I want to go? And so I felt like appraisal was that route. I learned a lot there. I met a lot of really great people. I realized that I did not want to stay on appraisal. And that's where I ended up applying to the MRED and using that to help transition to the equity side. And kind of had a similar, conundrum after the MRED. I had, the asset management job at AEW. And then I also had 2 acquisitions positions that I was evaluating at the end. And it was a big mix of, okay, like, who are the people that I want to work with and what is the job that I want to work with? And, I had a lot of great people that I had met at AAW during my time as an MRED. And that's where I was like, that's where I want to be. I want to work with those people. And, I never thought that I would still be there 9 years later. But, I'm kind of always constantly evaluating my role there. Is this still what I want to do? You kind of always have to keep thinking about where you want your career to go, even when you're at a company that you love and enjoy working with the people, just so you can, keep progressing and make sure that you don't, miss anything while you're typing behind your computer, just getting work done. So I think for me, it's always been like, what can get me to where I want to go next? Where do I want to be?
So Allison, their career transitions, they're talking about transitions that happen a little bit earlier stage in their careers. You also faced a different transition from a different, but just talk a little bit about navigating that.
Sure. Some of you are familiar with the Watt companies. There's a few streets around here and a building named after them. And I worked for them for 18 years, probably the very untraditional method to thinking about where you're going next. For me, part of that was that no year was ever the same, and I got to do different things all the time. I built an apartment building, I did different things, and I loved my role there. But the family made the decision that they were going in different directions. And so I was neutral. I was Switzerland. I actually divided their holdings up into 3 buckets for them. And I made the decision early on that I wouldn't go to work for any of them because I couldn't be neutral, right? Like if I was going to say, this bucket is the same as that bucket and that bucket. And there were all kinds of product types. And I had, the objective I had was every bucket had to have the same equity, had to have similar distributions over a 5-year span. And then it had subjective things. How hard are the partners? How hard is the real estate? And my perception, not calculated, about how easy it was to access more capital. So I was probably thinking I was going to end my career at Watt, and then I spent 2 years working on helping them split it up. So I was like, pandemic and splitting the company up, I decided intentionally that I was going to take some time off. So I called it my sabbatical. And I did take time off. And at the same time, I was ULI LA chair, which is like a second full-time job. So if they ever approach you, know that. Call me. It is more than they tell you it is, but it's a lot of fun. And so I did that. And then I started talking to people, right? Different conversations, people that you've built relationships with. And from those conversations, I ended up having a conversation with the team at Primestor. To be honest, it was only the second time in my life I'd ever seriously interviewed for a job in real estate. I'd only had one other interview, and it was a headhunter who'd recruited me to come to Watt. Other than that, all my jobs had been, I'd followed a relationship or a relationship had taken me with them. So it was very weird to be at my age, like actually out interviewing for jobs. And at Primestor, it didn't happen as an interview. They hired me to do some consulting work. I presented my report and they said, So how much consulting are you doing next year? Or do you want to execute these 9 principles you told us we should execute? So I've been there for 2 years trying to execute those 9 things. Some of them we've gotten done, some we're still working on.
That's excellent. That's incredible. I'll share a little bit about my own career transition. I spent 25 plus years inside major institutions. Started with Anita at Lincoln Property Company, which was mostly an industrial portfolio. And then I went to Speaker Properties, which was an office REIT. I moved from accounting into acquisitions. So whenever anybody tells you you can't move out of accounting, you can. And it was actually the very best basis I could have had for everything that I do. It is still probably one of my strongest skill bases. So I know people hate it, but please lean in. It will serve you well, both in your personal life and your professional life. So that part was a career, kind of that skill set to how do you take that? Because a performance, basically a budget stretched out for, 5, 10, however long years. And then I had done a lot of transaction experience. So acquisitions, dispositions, portfolios, both entity acquisitions, mergers, I'd done, you name it, in the transaction side. So complicated transactions was really my specialty. But when I went to Heitman, the view was that I would be on the West Coast, we'd grow the portfolio, and then I would really run the West Coast office. And we added, close to $1 billion in assets under my tenure with them. But when we started that discussion, it just became very, apparent that they're a very Chicago-centric organization and that wasn't going to change. And so that meant, did I want to be that person who's just sort of here on the West Coast, a lone wolf, and not kind of using all of the skills that I had kind of acquired? And so that led me to say, what else should I be doing? And I didn't see an opportunity for me to be as strategic inside of an organization as I wanted to be based on all of the things I had done, which included being, forward client facing, portfolio strategy, like everything to do with sort of also the capital management side. And so that led me to start Archere Investment Management, where I use my skills and experience being inside those shops and part of investment committees and truly making asset selections to help entrepreneurs. And I have a passion for women and people of color who do not get nearly their share of capital allocations to position themselves to attract institutional capital. And then also to, if you do attract that institutional capital, how do you manage it? How do you respond to it? Their needs and their requirements are different. And a lot of people aren't quite ready for that. So that's been a bit of my experience. I also, since much further along in my career experience, was in commercial real estate when I had kids. My kids are now grown. So let's talk about some other transitions, be they of the family, personal. Have you had those kind of family transitions? And maybe it's not kids, maybe it's parents, or maybe it's some other driver or geographic locations. There are so many things that go into kind of managing the interpersonal side of what's happening alongside your career.
Yeah, sure. So in my experience, well, there are 2 big things happened. I moved out from LA, and my boyfriend at the time, who know the possibility that I might move to East Coast, actually got more excited. He's being born and raised in Arcadia, Pasadena area, went to school in Riverside, never ever really leave the area. So I was still debating if I'm going to DC. He's calling everybody saying we're moving to DC. I was well, I'm not sure. I said yes. So that was 8.5 years ago. We moved together, and then we got engaged during COVID. We actually came back here, got married in Santa Monica, so it feels like a full cycle. And then we had a boy last year, and he just turned 1. Oh. Thank you. Yeah, last week. And of course, this is a lot of big transition. Of course, the baby come. I did take 6 months off from work. And of course, as a woman, you're kind of a little bit nervous, okay, you're leaving, there's people covering your work. And I talked to my mentor at the time, a lot. And she's kind of look, you're gonna come back and the deals are still gonna be here. and you just come back and, you get all the support. So 6 months later, when I got back to the office, the deals are there. The team is a little bit different because, people change jobs and different associates and all that. But deal moved on and I just jump right back in and just, get up to full speed. And then, but it's kind of now you go home, you can't just sit in couch. You go home, you start, you're okay, the mom gear just kicks in. It's okay, you're away for a whole day. So now it's your time to spend with your baby and all that. It's not easy. And I was lucky enough to have some support from the family. My parents came out to help. But it's kind of it's a transition, but it's also the things that you feel meaningful, it puts more meaning to the work you do every day. And on the other hand side, actually my mentor said one thing really stuck with me. And she said, working moms are the most efficient people in the world. And in a limited of time, they just get things done. And after become a working mom, you just find out you have to be purposeful. You have to be intentional with your time, and then you just have to be more efficient. Driving to work, you think about things. Do you have to refill the diaper? And kind of things on that. And then, but once you step into office, you shift your mind. You work on all those things. On your way going home, you think about other stuff. But you can make it work.
Yeah. So I also had a daughter last year, so finally getting up to speed on anything. I do have to say, my husband and I were really intentional, and I'm very fortunate that I have found a career that I love working in and know that I want to continue doing. And with that in mind, my husband had made a transition a couple of years ago to a different role that allows him to work from home and be more flexible. And that has really allowed me to, be able to jump right back into work as much as you can with everything going on, but having, that flexibility and a partner that's willing to support you through all of it. It's really challenging to go to an office 4 to 5 times a week. I have to travel up to my properties on occasion. And it's been great to have that support from him. And just kind of echoing everything Athena said, I am so much more efficient at my job. I say being a parent has been the hardest job I've ever had. It makes going to work seem easy a lot of times. The problems that I'm dealing with, we're not heart surgeons or anything like that. We're managing real estate. Obviously what we do is important, but things will get done. It will be okay. My properties were still there when I got back. A lot of the problems that I was I'm going on maternity leave. This can get solved. No, I still came back to a lot of those. So, the work can wait. It will be there. And, also had a lot of, support from my company and coworkers, knowing that transition is challenging mentally in so many ways. And it's good to kind of finally feel like I'm back up to speed.
I don't have a 1-year-old. Actually, I don't have children, but I think one of the things that you both talked about that's really relevant, whether or not you have children, is how you want to show up and who your support network is. And that is something I would say, for those of you starting out in your career, be really intentional about thinking about what that network looks like, because those are the people that you call when you're struggling with, should I make a change? What should I do? Whoever that team is that you call upon, whether it's friends or family, will be critical, and you will be managing your parents' health at some point. Let me just give you that foreshadowing. I'm currently helping manage someone who's 96, still living in her own home, right? So that takes me away from my work sometimes to be present for my partner. And my other serious full-time job is being adventure aunt and bougie aunt, But it takes balance, and there's an illusion that there's balance. You just have to choose what you want to be good at, right? Do you want to be good at your job? Do you want to be a great parent? You got to put intent. I want to be a good aunt. I want to be the aunt they need to take care of me when I'm old. I want to be the aunt that they had adventures with. No, seriously. But I want to be that person, and I've made those choices, and I've made a choice about who my circle is so that I can do the things I want to do.
And you guys made some really good points about sort of priorities, right? You're hearing they're talking about balancing things or managing multiple things. And I think the idea of balance is really one that we just need to sort of reimagine what it means. It does not mean that there's a fulcrum and that it's sitting level on each side. That is not balance, right? Not balance that we can maintain in life. It means that priorities shift, and sometimes this is priority, and sometimes that's the priority. But we manage those priorities so that we never let sort of anything fall, right? And I can remember having a similar challenge. I had just changed jobs, maybe 6 months into changing jobs, to an acquisition role where the REIT had just raised a ton of money. They were full grown, just full on stop acquisitions. And I was the acquisition manager when I found out I was pregnant. And so, believe me, that did not necessarily go over super well. But I had to say, baby coming. So that's what I've got to do, right? And yes, I was very concerned about having to take this step back. I started working from a different office to manage the commute and whatnot. But I can tell you that when I went back full in and I was ready to put my foot on the gas, it was there for me, right? And so what I did not do, and which I think would be hugely dilutive, is to feel guilty about being home with my baby, which would have made me not effective mom. And so when I went back, I also didn't feel guilty about being at work because I knew that I was creating that balance, managing that fulcrum. So that's just been my experience. So as we talk about those transitions, it's an interesting one because the ladies are joining the workforce now, and as they're focusing, they face kind of a different dynamic. It's really interesting talking to you guys about how long your tenure has been with your organizations, right? And I certainly started to experience that later in my organization, that now tenures are shorter, right? It's not so often that we meet people, I've been in my job, especially now, if you entered the workforce in the last, call it 10, 12 years, that you talk to them. I've been at my current company for 8 years, for 10 years, the 10 years have gotten a lot shorter. My husband works in career transition management. And I asked him, I said, is that employer driven or employee driven? Who's, and he said, it's probably 65% employee driven, kind of looking for that next opportunity. But he said the other side of it is, for the seniors in the house, he said it's 35% employer not providing the path, not providing the recognition of where those employees are going. So he's, younger employees are looking for where's that next opportunity, how am I going to grow? And employers have to do a better job about making sure that that's visible to the folks coming in their organization. How would you say you found your opportunities to advance in your organization, and how has that allowed you to kind of maintain your same opportunity?
Yeah, definitely. So I've been with Carlyle for 8.5 years. And actually, for our senior people, who's managing directors, because we have two groups, the younger managing directors are early 40s. The older ones are probably the 50s, 60s. So even counting the early 40s, the tenure for this level is 20 years. And we have 140 people in a group. It says a lot. And I also didn't think I would be there for 8.5 years. Even for our generation, feels like it's been at a place for too long. But I think, there are a couple of things after I joined the firm with the organization. I realized, one, if you're in real estate, jumping around doesn't allow you to see a cycle or like a business plan like play out. Our opportunistic fund has like a 5-year life of like developing the deal, lease up and sell. Like if you just leave like too soon, you might not even see the deals hitting like certain milestones. And you don't get to see like deals like perform or, run into challenges like as cycles going up and down. So it does like you learn more by kind of like overseeing like a life of your deal, and that's like incredible value to your career. And on the other hand side, it's like the relationship. I think for a lot of people who has been with the firm so long, it's like we all join as an associate and we grow, like we see each other get married, we see each other have kids, and then at the more senior, like a little bit older people like talk about the kids are hanging out with each other. It's kind of like, and also like not just within the firm, like with the partners like who happen to be like with their firm for a couple years, like you just get to know those people, like get to know their family. And real estate is such like a relationship business. It's like by staying there like for a long time, you do grow like those relationships more than you think it worth, and it goes like a really long way.
So it sounds like it's really part of the culture at Carlyle for that longevity to be there.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's a similar thing overall at AEW. Like if you look at the VP level and above, the average tenure is well over, 10 to 15 years. I think a part of it is, right, when you're younger, you've just graduated, you have fewer responsibilities. It's much easier to job hop, and an extra $10,000, $15,000 in salary seems like life-changing at the time. And while I understand that, I think that your priorities shift a little bit when viewing your career and what your company offers. And so there are other non-monetary benefits of being at a company for a while that, you get, I feel like I got so much more grace going on, maternity leave, for example, than if I had just started fresh at a new company. And I think that's just kind of the reality of it. At the same time, I guess in terms of like kind of going back to the being able to progress within the company, I've gotten kind of lucky in that opportunities opened up for me within AEW because people left for another position, and I was ready and willing to put my hand up for more work. And so a lot of things have just kind of naturally happened like that. I think if some of those people had never left, I might have kind of tapped out at AEW, and just naturally, there's only so many senior positions and people there. So, I understand that it can be challenging to open up those opportunities, but I think you also need to be recognizing when those opportunities do show up. So a little bit of mix there.
Yeah, that's interesting. So it sounds like there's been enough mobility and enough movement of personnel within AEW to facilitate your growth goals.
Yep.
Allison, do you have any perspective on that? Because I think we've both been working for a long time to see just how often people shift now. It's really interesting.
I clearly don't follow the trend, but I think you really hit on the point. It's finding opportunities. And if you're curious and you're willing to raise your hand, you may find that $10,000 or $15,000 doesn't matter because you're going to get broader experience. And the other one, be sure you know what pond you're jumping into, right? And in today's age, you can learn a lot about another firm. So you could leave a firm and go to another firm, and the culture is different. And, we talk a lot about culture, but it's a big part of how you spend your day. You're spending all this time with people. Are they happy there? Do they like the work that they're getting to do? Are they treated fairly? Like those are things that are outside, but you need to evaluate.
So there's two more questions I want to get through before we kind of open it up to the audience for questions. And one is AI is affecting everything, and especially analyst work, research work, what have you. Are you using AI in your current roles, in your personal life? Is it affecting you?
Absolutely. So at work, like we're like not sort of like asked, but like encouraged to use like ChatGPT. We have like a research tool called Perplexity. It's more kind of like searching on, you know, you can ask a research question and pull like all the data for you. And of course, like Copilot makes like sort of like Microsoft Officeware like a bit easier. And then for like asset management, there's like actually more like AI tools, kind of like it's like more like a leasing tool, like replacing the typical chatbot. And you can actually call someone in student housing, like at least AI is a big tool, and a lot of students don't realize like they're actually talking to like AI, or like eventually like they just got lease signed with AI. So it's like a really big component, and I would say, you know, AI does a really good job on, you know, getting things like more efficient, like aggregating and synthesize data. But you still have to check, because it's not like always guarantee like, you know, AI knows like if it's right or wrong, you know, like also like AI probably doesn't even know like the context of like the questions that you're asked, like all that. So in the end of the day, we are like the person who are making the decisions. It's not AI. So you're really just kind of like using AI as a tool. It's kind of like changing and shaping how we work and make us like more efficiently. But in the end of the day, like, you know, you want to be still sit with the accountability or experience, and something like AI can replace for now.
Mm-hmm. Allison, are you guys using it in your firm?
Okay, so the official answer is you can use AI, but you cannot put any specific company-specific data in, because we're SEC regulated. Are people using it? Yes. Are they using it for the wrong reasons, like to write battling emails with one another? Yes. Are we talking about how else to use it? I am currently spending 2 hours every Saturday researching AI, going to things to learn more about it. I went to a dinner that Woods Baggett hosted recently, and they showed a rendering of a building that they had designed and presented to a client that they rendered all in AI. They had generated over 1,000 images. The client loved the building so much, it was a bid competition. The client said, okay, you can proceed. And they thought that that would be that the building would go through more iterations. And the client said, no, you can go to CDs, write us the contract to go to construction development on this drawing. And so I think it's here to stay, but your point that it's a tool, I've heard the explanation. It's like when Excel came, or also referring to AI as your intern, right? Like they're going to produce certain data, but you need to use the skill of discernment. We're finding younger professionals are really struggling with that part of it. When the analyst sends me a drawing that says, this would work on the site, and I'm like, there's no parking and there are no windows for half the units. That's great, but you're not an architect, you're the analyst.
Right.
Yeah, and then, you know, we have Copilot available to us for like internal stuff. So one thing that I've loved using it for is abstracting my office leases and being able to ask it like very specific data and things that I used to, like if I had an intern, I would make them go through all the leases, like I can get very quick. And so, you know, I love the efficiency aspect, and, you know, being able to ask all these kind of like, what does this say? What if, like, and being able to drive into the details more. But then, you know, there's other times where I've used it and it spits out something that completely doesn't make any sense. And, you know, it's like, I would have been better off just writing, you know, whatever myself the first time. So I think if anything, it's a tool, and it's hopefully will make our lives easier going forward, but still a lot to learn.
I have one add to that. Prompt I recently heard is to ask your AI, please don't produce a response that you have not fact-checked, and you will get different answers. And the other prompt is, I'm a fan of the book, The Art of Gathering by Priya Parker. And so you put in, if Priya Parker was planning this event, what would she do? So you can do that with any author, and it will then filter. So those are my two prompts.
That's excellent. You know, one of the things I've been, I was just at a conference, they were saying that women are using it less than men. Why? And I don't know that that's necessarily true. I think it's possible that we're just using it differently and a bit more cautiously, because one thing that I know for sure is the response that you get from any of the AI prompts is also based on the fact that you are asking the question. If I ask that same question, I will get an answer tailored to my own queries, right? So just like what's ever in your feed is kind of confirming whatever you thought. And even when you ask it, we'll take the opposite perspective, you get sort of weak arguments because it's like, I've got to keep you going. That the AI learning is learning what you think and what your perspective is. And so every time you ask it a question, it is with that in mind. So I think the danger is that anyone take that out of context and think, well, now I've been given a fully articulated answer, which would not be accurate. Okay, one more question before we open this up. Is there, as you think about this audience, especially the young folks that are the young women that are in our audience that have maybe some experience, some question about what they're doing, they're finishing up their programs, what would you think is, what is the best advice that you were given on your career that you think would be interesting and relevant for the audience?
I would say one of the advice I receive, I think it's like applicable for students or like for, being at workplace is nobody's gonna remember the details of, the project that you work on, but people are gonna remember who you are and how they feel when they work with you. Like, finding a job, like, getting to the returns, those are obviously important things, but, like how you perform under stress, how you treat other people, are you treating other people as how you want to be treated, is actually more rememberable, like for everybody, and it goes a long way. Like if like market change, like the deals you work on change, but your reputation stays with you. And in this industry, again, it's relationship focused. So, like being the person you want to be really takes you a long way for, success, even like finding a job or like, establish partnership, or just kind of like, one day you start your own business and you call someone, it's like, hey, we work on this deal together. Like if they remember you as the person that they wanted to work with you, that's when you have like your new partner.
Yeah, and then one piece of advice that I've gotten from my boss, and I thought it was, incredible, and I continue to share it with everyone, is that no one cares more about your career than you. So it's really up to you to, kind of put yourself out there, and, you need to tell people what you're working on. If you, accomplish something great, being on this panel here, right? I'll just be like, hey, boss, like I was at USC today giving this presentation and on this panel, and you kind of have to just find little ways to let people know what you're working on and promoting yourself in a tasteful way. So that's where it's always up to you to do what's best for your career, and yeah.
Excellent.
I give this tip all the time, so if any of you've heard it before, I apologize. Know your numbers. There's a TED Talk that I will send to around, and it's called The Missing Third. And it's that men and women who are successful, this first study was done years ago, but women are generally show up and are better at running teams. Doing their actual job, men and women who are successful are equal. And where women are missing is in talking about their numbers. I first heard this in a presentation and on a Saturday, the year that the light rail started coming down here. That's how long ago it was. And I know because when I got to the office on Monday, I knew that I knew my numbers and I talked about them when I was asked, but I did not talk about them in conversation. And I got to the office and I had been in Phoenix on Friday. I heard this lecture on a Saturday, and I sat down across from Scott Watt, and I had his attention for 30 minutes because I talked about my Phoenix visit in numbers. I saw 6 buildings managed by Con-Am. The average rent was, and by the way, I had to study to do this because I did not have notes in front of me, but I studied. The building we're building, we're currently performing the rent at $3 a square foot or whatever it was at the time. And the last 2 deals have traded at this cap rate or that cap rate. By the way, everyone else in the office was talking about the fact that Scott Watt had ridden the light rail down here to go to the SC game. And 90% of the time, that's what I would have been doing. So when you go back to the office to talk about it, you're going to go back and say, I was really fortunate. SC invited me. And there were about 40 or 50 people in the room. There were students, probably a third from this program, a third from that program. There were alums there. You're going to quantify what you're talking about. And if you start to focus on that in your career, you will realize that men do it much more often. The CEO who had been at Watt for nearly 27 years, as soon as I heard this lecture, I realized that's exactly how he talked in every room I went with him. And what it is that people, as they get more senior, need data points. And that's what they attach to. Yeah. So that is my advice, and it's been the most transformational for me.
That's wonderful. I would say my word of advice to everyone in the room is to be clear on how you define yourself and not let anyone else define you. Because you will walk into a room based on perceptions, and this happens for me especially, and people will try to decide who I am and what my skills are. But I remain clear on who I am and what my skills are. And if you remain clear, then your path will be much easier, because when you run into a roadblock or you hit an obstacle, you will know immediately that that's just not in alignment with who you know you are, and the change will come. So it's really important, and it's really easy to lose unless you are intentional about it. So with that, we have just a few more minutes, and I would love to open it up to the audience for questions.
Thank you, ladies. I feel like we've been to a lot of panels recently, and this was definitely by far the best one that I've ever been to. So thank you. Appreciate your advice. My question is more back to transitions. A lot of you have obviously done very different things in your own careers. For those of us who are kind of looking for our first job out of grad school or out of undergrad, and feel like you might get concerned about getting stuck in whatever bucket you choose, do you have any advice on, if you were to pick acquisitions or asset management or any of those different fields, development, any advice on if you've picked something and you feel like you want to transition, or what might be the easier path from one bucket to another as we start out?
So I will share a conversation I had with my son. I have a 27-year-old who is also in real estate. And in his, I'll call it like 5 years of kind of deciding where he ultimately wanted to focus, he took a number of jobs and was just very, very concerned that he was making the wrong decision and wasted time. And explained that, first of all, you're just getting started, right? And so every experience that you have is like adding tools in your toolbox, right? And just like you have a toolbox, you don't pull them all out for every job, but you know how to use them and you know what they are. So any role that you take, learning what you don't want is also clarifying on learning what you do. And there's no learning opportunity, especially if you approach it that way, that doesn't have value. And it goes back to that same thing. If you stay clear on what is for you, who you are and what you want to be doing, the opportunity to do that will be there. So I don't think that there's any, I took this job and now I'm stuck. You're only stuck if you decide that you're stuck.
I think the thing I would add to that is use your network. You've invested in yourself, or your family's invested in you coming to SC. Use your relationships. Don't get stuck in you fall into your career and you're inside that shop. Go to the networking events, go to whatever organization feels right for where you are, and be talking to your fellow classmates about what they're finding in their other roles. We do probably 90% of our hiring is through relationships. Either someone knew someone or they're involved in ULI. And that, if you decide you want to transition from Lynn made it from accounting into asset management and into acquisitions, that part of that trajectory was driven by her, but a lot of those opportunities will come to you based on the depth of your relationships.
Yeah, and one thing that I was reminded of, I was recently speaking with one of the MREDs who's a male and decided to make a move, and with that is applying for new jobs. And his kind of philosophy has been, he's out looking at a lot of different things. He's like, if I'm like 50 to 60% of the things on the job description apply to me, like I view that as I am well qualified, because where's the room for growth if you check off every single box? So when you're out there and putting yourself out there, don't be afraid to put your hand up and be like, hey, I have these skills. Maybe I don't fit every single thing that you want, but I'm a good worker, I'm smart, I can learn quick. And that's really half of the job, is being teachable and being able to learn. So, don't fall into the trap of, I'm not qualified, because you never know.
Yeah, I totally agree with what everyone said, because like when I went to like start every job, I didn't think like this is kind of like a transition. I'm kind of like I'm putting myself in. But as time goes, like within or without, within or like outside of your organization, there are opportunities. Like even within our group, like we see people like started in acquisition, moved to asset management, or asset management to acquisition, or like even people like started in like maybe like the treasury, like portfolio, like reporting, who find interesting asset management, raise their hand. And I think, Michelle like mentioned before, is like raise your hand if you think you want to try something, like raise your hand, and people usually wouldn't say no if it means like, outside your work scope, like you have to do a little bit more. But if that's what it gets you there, like it's worth it. And, every single role and every single work like you work on is going to take you somewhere for your next step.
Yeah, I think that Allison made a really good point. The trade orgs and the places, the rooms that you decide to be a part of to expand your network are hugely important. I'm currently the president of African American Real Estate Professionals, and Primestor is one of our platinum sponsors. And they have made so many hires throughout our network and throughout our talent pool. So make sure that you are in those rooms, whether it's crew, ULI, that's how you expand your network. And there was statistics done a long time ago. This has been a study it's a known fact forever, that women will, exactly to Michelle's point, if we don't check all the boxes, we want to try apply for the job. And men, if they can check, 40%, 50%, they're like, that job's mine, right? And so, but looking at it that way, it's like, if you already do all of those skills, where is your room for growth? And so remembering to network around that is, I think, an important point.
And in that same vein of studies, the study is every man asks for more money. So every woman needs to ask for more money, more vacation time, whatever it is. Don't take what's put in front of you. They can still say no, but ask.
How much more? Percentage. What's a comfortable percentage?
Sometimes once you know something about the job, now you need to go do your research, right? So I do a lot of negotiating. So I am a master delayer. And so even if it's in a job interview or whatever, and someone's asking me for that question, First, I'd like to understand the job responsibilities, then we can talk about what would make me happy.
Thank all of you so much for this wonderful panel. I agree with everyone in the room. It's been exceptional. So thank you for your knowledge and your wisdom. My question is piggybacking off of the last question and the responses. So when you have seized the opportunity, or when you've been elevated to a new position, what is something that has helped you guys rise to the occasion? Because, taking the opportunity is one thing, but then rising to the occasion is another. So what are some things that have helped you kind of believe in yourselves and propel yourselves into that new level of your careers?
I would say that's where, having mentors and people that, can help support you has been key for me, right? Like a lot of times, there's a couple more like senior people in the office that I'm like, hey, I'm working on this. I would love to get your thoughts on it, because they are a pool of wisdom. And, not being afraid to go ask questions and just run things past people has is the reason why I have been successful, is because I've been able to tap into the knowledge of other people and just not being afraid to say when, hey, like, I don't know what to do here. Like, this is what I'm thinking, but I would love to have your feedback on, what it is and how I should evaluate this. So, that's where having, allies either in your office or just within the industry. I've definitely called up other people before where I know they have expertise, and just be like, hey, can I run something past you? Has been really helpful.
Yeah, I think intelligent questions are like the lifeline, right? Experts and people who have something to share are always willing to share, especially if it's going to be uplifting and helping someone else advance. So if you're mentioning an opportunity, you got an opportunity to rise to occasion. Okay, so this is already a stretch assignment. So it's not the time to put your ego on like, I already know everything to do, right? It is the time to be just hugely inquisitive and ask as many questions as possible. And from your entire, like you said, your entire network, because you're not the only one that wants to see you succeed.
I think too, when you're asking those questions, two things: set a 90-day goal in your new role. Like, be sure you're clear on what someone wants you to achieve and know where you're going to be in 90 days. So plot out your first 90 days. And when you're asking questions, especially on the asset management side, I find that people tend to ask the maintenance person one question and ask the leasing director a different question. If you come up with a set of questions, ask everybody the same set of questions. They may answer them very differently, but you will get filtered data from people, whether you're asking up the chain, around you, or below you. You need to gather information to execute. Be consistent in how you approach people in those questions.
That's the one question that has often served me really well. And it doesn't matter if I'm talking to brokers, to financing people, to whatever specialty it is. My conversation ends with, what should I be asking you that I haven't asked? And often I'll tell you that one time on an insurance issue, I had this whole conversation, I had all my notes, and then I asked him, what am I asking you what haven't I? And the issue that he brought up was huge. So it's a worthwhile question.
And I would add on is like, if the opportunity doesn't exist, create it. Like if something you think it's worth trying, create that. Like, for all the new sectors we're buying, it's because someone said like, why don't we look at something different than all the traditional sectors? And our team actually invested in something completely different. Like we actually had one time investing in Manhattan Beach Studio. It's completely different. And we had a deal in New York. It's like a glass event space that's different. And people who raise their hand kind of leading those projects, it's kind of like they created opportunity for themselves. If you think there's, we should start some groups, then start it. Like when I went back to work, we didn't have a working mom group in our team. And my mentor was like, why don't we start one? So we started one, and we had a couple moms to be, and we had some new moms, and we had all the people who went through the process, share it. So it's kind of you can rise to those opportunities, or you can try to create those opportunities for yourself as well.
Robin Billups with the Billups Group. I want to entreat you guys. I'm a senior citizen in the room. I'm certain I'm the oldest person in here, but I want to say that this is so critically important. What I heard that you guys have to remember, you're looking to obtain marketable skills. You're not going there to get a job. The mission is to obtain the skill set for that job that you applied for. Secondarily, you have to know your own value. So when you ask the question about how do I get an increase, or when you're interviewing, what's the salary band? What's the pay grade and the salary band? So it gives you some idea of, am I starting at the lowest point, the midpoint, or the end point? The other thing that is so critically important, women, please stop writing these long emails. Nobody's going to read them. Nobody's going to read them. So get to the point. Get to the point. Answer to the call of the question. If you have a question, you want to ask yourself that same question, but also too, when you're asking them, let them answer. And don't add to it. Stop telling the story, because if you tell the story, you've disconnected yourself from the interaction. Does that make sense? And I want to treat you guys. You guys have given some exceptional responses. But what I also heard too, do your due diligence. If you're not spending time doing a little bit of research about the people on the panel, about this event, about the school, if you're not spending that time, you're not going to be prepared for the questions that you need to ask when you hear the good information. So due diligence, and this is what we do in real estate. Our whole job is nothing but due diligence. Getting information, gathering information, processing data. So let that be your character trait, that you are knowledgeable about what you're asking, even if you don't know what you're talking about. Does that make sense?
Well, thank you guys. And we are right at 1:30. We want to thank you so much for allowing us to take up this time in your afternoon and encourage you to really network throughout the room. There's a great mix of senior people, your academics from the school and your program, as well as each other, and we are the network that we'll be using as we go forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you.